Hello, hello. This is Elmo the Conservative, and on Brutally Honest Talk Radio, have a guest in house with us today by the name of Dan Schaefer. He has some background and history in politics and is running for the House of Representatives for the state of Missouri for the next election on the state level. Welcome, Dan, and please
Thanks, Elmo.
say a few more things about yourself, and then we'll jump into this.
Sure. Well, thanks, Elmo. It's a great introduction there. I'm running for the Missouri House of Representatives, District 97. Missouri's a pretty red state, and I'm running as a Democrat. And I actually happen to be a fairly progressive person, socially progressive, I would say, fiscally conservative. My background is I've had many years in engineering, electrical engineering. So I designed a lot of computers. I used to write a lot of software. Decided to cut loose at one point and travel with the salespeople. So I ended up being like a sales engineer for many, many years, traveled the world, literally traveled the world. I was a globetrotter for a number of years, picked up a lot of good information about people in different countries and really good experience for me. And it kind of rounded out my experience. Around 2019, I decided to do my own podcast, and actually I produced two different podcasts, did about 200 episodes and interviewed a lot of people.
Wow.
And last year, I asked the Democratic Party, why isn't anybody running against the Republican here in this district? And they said, why don't you run? So I had to join the Democratic Party and decided to just jump in and do it. So it's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Okay. All right. Good deal. And you have some ideals or things that you created and you talk about sometime. So there's a lot. We'll give them like a website or a place where they can find more information about you. But
Yes.
we'll this is just one session, so we'll hit a few things. One thing that I saw in your profile that got my attention, I wanted to know more about, and I'm just making sure that I say it correctly. The moral certainty and political blindness,
Mm-hmm.
and I never, or most of the time, I don't assume that what I see is what I think it is. So you can kind of define that and then elaborate on it a little bit. Moral
Sure.
certainty.
Well, that's an article I wrote, I think, back in early May, and I've challenged myself to write an article every weekday, and I've been keeping that up for the last couple of months. So forgive me if my brain is a little bit rusty about that particular article, but if I recall correctly, I started off talking about Michelle Obama and a statement that she made in the 2016 Democratic National Convention, and that was where she made that famous statement, "When they go low, we go high." And it's key off from that point to write the rest of the article. I understand where she was coming from, but I completely disagree that she should have said that. That actually created more distance between the Democratic Party and the people.
Let me ask
And
you
the
a
reason
question
why,
about that. So
what's that?
I never heard Michelle say that, but I did hear Hillary say it. So you think Hillary might have stolen that from her, or kind of repeated that idea, or who would you say was the
I
first
don't,
one to say that?
yeah, I'm not sure. I do know that Michelle Obama said it, and she got a lot of attention for that. But the problem with that expression, whether it was Obama or Hillary, I'm sure Hillary might have reflected it as well. The problem with that attitude is that it says, if you don't agree with me, you're not moral. You're immoral. You are somehow lower than us.
Oh,
And yeah, I don't agree with that on the outset. I think there are some people, obviously, they have some really obnoxious perspectives, like people that would support genocide and things like that. Okay, I don't have a problem calling the shots there, but I think 99% of Americans would be clear on that moral decision. But the Democratic Party has always been tarred with this painted with this brush that says, we're better than you, we're higher than you. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that's the right attitude. Hillary did say basket of deplorables.
yeah.
That was another big mistake. It was a big tell as to how she thinks about people. And that is completely the wrong attitude, I think. And so the moral certainty part about it is that you must feel pretty morally certain about your perspectives to say something like that and to act that way. Is that just isolates you from everybody else. I think that's what I was getting at in that article there that you're referring to.
Yeah, and then also you mentioned that you were writing every weekday, or you made a decision to do that, and that's a lot.
It's a lot.
That's 5 times a week.
Yeah.
If this was in May, then you may have done 10 or 15 or 20 since then.
I've done like since I started this quest, I think it's up to 70 right now. So
Okay.
yeah, and I
Okay.
don't give myself a break even on vacation. I was still
Really?
writing. Well, what you call vacation. I'm somewhat retired right now. I'm working part time, but I'm
Yeah.
have a lot of free time. But still, even when I travel somewhere, I try to write an article a day.
I think I know what you mean because there's always so much going on for people that are in politics
Yeah.
or in the news that
Yeah.
almost every day there's something that comes out that's worth reporting on or talking about to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
Sometimes much doesn't change from within a couple of days, but then look at what's going on with ICE in
Hmm.
LA, and I want to talk about that a little bit later as well. And then so in the same title of the same article, political blindness, those affect each other, I'm guessing. Yeah, talk a little more about that, or when someone is taking this stance of being on a moral higher ground, is it affecting them politically? Is that part of what you meant with
Yeah,
that?
I think it just alienates people because, it fortifies it not only alienates people, but it also fortifies your opposition.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, I think when it comes to moral behavior, you should really live it rather than talk about it. It's the old expression, that praying in public sort of thing that was always looked down upon
Mhm.
because your relationship with God is your relationship. It's not everyone else's relationship. You don't want to pray in public. And I think with morality, it's a trap that I think both the right and the left fall into. And I think the right certainly has fallen into it as well with their attitude about immigration. We talked about, or you mentioned ICE in LA. There's this sense of righteousness about what they're doing, and it's really not solving the problem. It's just making it worse, and it's solidifying the opposition. And you'll see that happen this Saturday on the 14th of June, where everybody's going to be, it's going to be no King's Day, right? Because
Mm.
the more you try to tell people what to do and tell them what the righteous path is, the more they'll push back on you.
Yeah, I know that in politics and in the church there can be this confusion. Just saying with the church and talking about Christianity is, my church, we have been taught to hate the sin and not the sinner.
Mhm.
So, more focusing on, I think it's okay to say this is morally right or this is morally wrong to behave in this way or do this. But like you said, it alienates people, potential voters, when you say that you are low life and with a low IQ or something insulting, and it should be. I don't know. I think it's a good way to lead people when you say, when you do these things, you get good results. And when you do
Right.
these bad things, you get bad
You don't get
results,
good news. Right.
or at least look at history and when this has
Right.
been done before. So maybe we don't want to go in that direction. And then when I spoke to you once before, I mentioned the sandbox just as a test,
Mhm.
a confined area or community or city or whatever. One example is defunding the police.
Yeah.
I don't know if I know there's not as many people that are on board with that as there were 5 years ago. But for anybody who's, really strong and pushing for that, first of all, you should be willing to do that in your city, in your district. So let's see what happens when they don't have the money to be fully staffed or to get all the weapons that they need. Let's see what happens. That's the best way to test and know. But you want to test out if a bomb works, like Oppenheimer. They didn't detonate it over a whole city. They had a small area. So let's see what happens. And then with the results of that, with the facts of what happens, it's hard to argue with what what the effects are going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about, you picked that example, defunding the police. On the surface, it sounds pretty bad, like a pretty bad idea to me. We do rely on police officers to maintain control in the sense that we don't have somebody burglarizing our house or some yahoo running up the
Yeah.
street, 90 miles an hour through your neighborhood or something like that and endangering everybody. Those are the kinds of things you need police for. And defunding that, you're putting people in a position of having to decide between uh, a defunded police department, and well, you're basically putting them in that position of having to deal with that. And I've already seen the police officers being defunded. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I grew up in Florissant, Missouri, which is North St. Louis County, and we would have police. We had our own police department there. They would ride two per car. They had partners, and
Yeah.
that was standard procedure. And
Right.
now you see a lot of times you see one police officer per
Yeah.
car. And
I
that
see a
really
lot of
concerns
that.
me because they can get into situations where they need a partner there. You know, you're coming
Very
up on a car,
fast.
you pull someone over for speeding or something. You need your, I would think, I mean, I'm not a cop, but I would think you'd feel a whole lot safer if you had your partner kind of backing you up, you know.
Absolutely.
So, you know, they've
Yeah.
already been defunded to a certain degree. And I think what happens in these situations is the community begins to distrust the police because the police starts to not trust the community. They don't
Mhm.
get out into the community as much. They're not getting out of their car and talking to the people. Again, going back to when I was a kid, we had a lieutenant, forgot what his name was, but he was with the police department and he was considered a friend of the school. And he would come
Right.
by like once or twice a year. That we'd have a little get together, and he would talk to the kids, and the kids could ask him questions. Well, I was asked dumb questions like, "Can I touch your gun?" or something like that. But it was always about good relations, you know.
Right.
And so I
Right.
always felt comfortable, you know. Of course, I grew up in a fairly microcosm of America, but I grew up pretty comfortable with the police, and I really had no problems with them. And there were some times where I did get myself in a little bit of trouble,
Mhm.
underage drinking sort of trouble, and the cops gave me a break, you know, because
Yeah.
that's the way things went back then. But you know, there's this distrust at this point, and it gets to a point where you know, in LA, we're seeing where police are hiding behind their riot gear and such. I would like
Mm.
to see them just put that riot gear down and just mix with the people and say, hey, look, we're just here to make sure you guys aren't going to, you know, burn any cars or deface any buildings or anything, and just
Yeah.
walk among the people.
And I guess we could talk about that now, but I know the police they have certain things to put in place, and they're gauging what the threat is, or the
Right.
the threat size. Yeah, I've
But
seen, you know,
the
seen.
fact that you're using that word threat is really that's telling because why should we look at our fellow civilians as potential threats, right? I mean, I understand that there's that element out there, but we become so used to police officers being brutal and thinking about things
Mm.
as in terms of threats rather than in terms of opportunities to help people. But I mean to interrupt you, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm saying based on what's going on, like whether they are wearing their riot gear or not, but if they show up to a location, there's a crowd of people, like where all these police cars were parked on the freeway by a bridge, and there's 20 or 25 people on the other side of the rail up on the bridge lobbying and throwing things over, and all of the cars are damaged to one degree or another. Guys have smoke bombs. Or they're wearing bandanas covering half their face, and they have to treat it based on what it is.
No. Your video froze for a second, but your audio kept going. Oops, I think we got cut off. How do I rejoin? I think we just got cut off. There we go. Now
Yeah,
you're
now
back.
now I'm back. It was saying I could rejoin, and it had a refresh button. But what it really meant was I'm going to disconnect you, and you're going to. Hopefully, this will all be okay. Good. I see the clock is still going. There's still 1 o'clock, and Riverside like anticipates that. Like it can tell what you're talking about. Like it, there's a section called "Remove Fluff" or something that's not related
Yeah.
to the topic. But anyway, we'll fix that. We'll fix
I
that
see.
in editing. So I was gonna say about that when we first started that police officers and teachers are two of the occupations that I want to see get paid more money, just because they're put
Yeah.
and with the police officers that are out on the street, walking or patrolling, they should get more than they're cops that never leave or barely leave the precinct or sitting behind a desk. Even if they've been there a long time, understand that there's got to be some priority to them. They need to be shown that they're appreciated. And then, the police department answers to the chief of police. The chief of police boss is the mayor. So the mayor can get with the chief and they can set up those events where the police can come. They came to my school also when I was in elementary school, but they come in and talk to the adults because a lot of grown-ups are teaching children you need to be scared and you don't need to trust them or police are bad or whatever. Because I'm a conservative, I strongly believe in this thing about judging people as individuals and not by groups. So if you know the individual names of officers, then you can say, I like this person. He has a very different personality from this one, but I know who I'm dealing with or what I'm dealing with depending on who it is. I was in Dunkin' Donuts with one of my sons, had to be at least 5 years ago, and there were a couple cops sitting at another table, another round table. And so when it's time for them to get up and leave, one of them came over and talked to my son, who was maybe 12 at the time, and just asked him, "Are you getting good grades in school?" and a couple other things along those lines. And then took out a $50 bill and gave it to him, like as a reward
Whoa.
for doing well. And so I'm totally okay with that. Some men have too much pride for another man to give their son money. I don't care. I said, we graciously accept. Thank you, officer.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So
Made your son's day.
right.
Yeah.
And his impression of police officers, from his own interaction was something positive. And if I remembered that, and I'm a grown person making money, and that's bigger than any allowance I ever gave him or that he ever got at one time. So I'm sure he's going to remember it. So
Good. That's really good.
yeah,
It's a good
when
story.
I look at things in the news, there's one common thing. We're all part of the human race. We're all connected. This morning, I heard about the plane crash in India last night, right
Oh,
after takeoff.
yeah.
Close to 250 people, their lives taken away. And I always try to put myself in someone else's shoes. And
Mhm.
it is a terrible thing. At the same time, I have to compare that to if you're up at 30,000 feet and then you hit some hard turbulence, or you look out the window and, the wing is smoking, and then the captain comes on the speaker and says, "All right, everybody, we're going down. Put your head between your knees." And then you have this,
Yeah.
some people have handled it much better than others, understand. But if anyone doesn't want to be in anything close to that situation, that is much worse than within a minute or two after this took off. I
Yeah.
think most of them didn't know it was coming or didn't know what hit them. The
Yeah.
is still pretty close to the ground, and the captain he's trying to recover and get this thing back up in the air. So I don't know if they even have time to go on and talk to people and to prepare. But
No,
they
not really.
usually. I
Yeah.
mean, this was an Indian airline. They're much different from their procedures. But I know on Delta or Southwest, you got to keep your seatbelt on until the light comes
Yeah.
off. As usually at least 6-7 minutes after takeoff.
Yeah. It's kind of the same in India because I've flown Indian Air
Oh yeah.
before because I used to travel to India not quite a bit. I was there twice for 2 weeks at a time each, and yeah, we'd base ourselves out of Bangalore, but we would fly at all the different cities out there: Delhi, Hyderabad, Chennai, Mumbai, and so I've flown Indian Air
Hmm.
before. It's pretty much the same as here. They have their same
Yeah.
regulations. I never had any feeling that it was any less safe than it was
Sure.
here. Yeah, the procedures are almost exact. The only thing it's different. Is I got on one flight and the stewardess said, "This is a meditation flight."
What does
I'm
that?
like, "What's that?"
What does
Right?
that
So
mean?
we get up. Well, we get up to about our cruising altitude, whatever it was, 30,000 feet. It was a short flight, probably about an hour, hour and a half or so. But while we were up there, as soon as we got to cruising altitude, she said, "Okay, now everybody follow along with me." And she had us sit there and close our eyes. And she brought us, it was a guided meditation, basically. One of the coolest flights I've ever
Huh.
had. And it was, she talked about, listen to the sound of the plane, listen to the sound of your breathing, and
Hmm.
so on. And she brought it to this point, and then she sings this song probably from her native place or
Hmm.
whatever. and it was just the most delightful feeling. I got off that plane feeling refreshed and everything. So it was just kind of a fun experience to
Yeah.
have that in India.
Now, I'm sure that wasn't the purpose of the flight, but there's some flights that would have that on it. If she's mentioning to people that it is one, that means that some are not. So I'm wondering if that's kind of like being in first class, or just something elevated or complimentary that's added to it.
I don't know. I've flown a lot within India. Almost every day I'd be flying, but it was no, that was the only flight I had there that
Yeah.
did that. It was fun. It's like it was like 20 years ago, but I still
Yeah.
talk about it today.
Yeah. That's where yoga came from. And this guy, oh, what is this man's Sad or Saji, the Indian guru with the long white beard?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, now that the mic is open and I'm on the air, my
Oh,
brain
that's
goes blank,
okay.
but yeah, I know who you're talking
But
about.
I've seen interviews with him, and they've had a culture for a very long time, and they have figured out a lot about meditation, and heard the story about this guy who he just calmed down and slowed his heartbeat so slow that people thought he was dead, and
Oh,
so he
wow.
like went into like a coma state, but he was able to come out of it anytime he wanted to. So,
Mhm.
hey, we're all in the same world on the same earth, and we can all learn things from each other in different cultures. That
Yeah, you
same
might be talking about
that same
uh,
Hindu priest, or the man I was talking about, he told a story of someone vibrating water, or like creating like a heat with either both their hands or holding their palm over a small puddle of water, and it started to rumble, rumble or vibrate.
wow.
So there's something real about that, and Bruce Lee like was able to like combine energy, but he would use it in fighting. So put a lot of energy,
Yeah.
channel it to his hand, and then thrust it forward, and with him not moving his feet, and then he knocks a guy 15 feet back, and he's only
Oh, yeah.
160 pounds or whatever.
Yeah, that guy was fierce though, man. He was one of the best.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
was.
amazing.
I studied karate for many years as well, and the techniques he had were quite
And
good,
I've
quite good.
heard that he was very controversial at the time, because he was the first one that wanted to combine taekwondo, karate, jujitsu, and others together. And all the other masters and instructors were exclusive to those martial arts. Almost like there was a church that wanted to bring all the denominations together and say, listen,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
going to just sort through all of this, and, we can talk about it or whatever. But yeah, we know how religion can be, and how dare somebody take a slight turn to the left or the right when something has been done the
right.
same way for 1,000 years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, where do you think all the factions come from in any religion?
Yeah, and then the combining of the two, where
Mm.
the government is the church, like
Oh,
in
yeah,
many countries in the Middle East. you know
yeah.
Whatever
Yeah,
is the
it was that
religious
way in
law
Europe.
is the law of the land. We
Right.
use the police to enforce religious law, but
Yeah.
we learn
Well, the Bible's
from
original
history as far as that goes.
from what I understand, the Bible's original intent was to lay down law. It was a book of law, the Old Testament
Oh
especially.
yeah.
The New Testament is more about God loving Jesus and so on.
Hmm.
But the Old Testament, if you read something like Leviticus or something, especially, I mean, it's really a series of
Yeah.
laws that are somewhat antiquated these days. I mean, women aren't communicated when they're having that period of time every month or
Yeah.
something like that. We pretty much gotten around all that, but yeah, most of those laws are antiquated. But the New Testament is something that I think has much resonates much more
Sure.
today in our society.
Sure. And I think at that time it was good for someone to have some kind of a guide or a moral compass before governments were really established, for people to know how to live right. What is the right thing to do, and based on there being a God, and if there is a God, I serve this God. What does he want? Because when I'm left to my own
Right.
opinion and my own vices, things can get selfish.
Right.
Just
Right.
because you said you traveled to India, let me ask if you ever heard of Ravi Zacharias.
No, no. I traveled there in
Oh
business,
yeah.
so I didn't get to do too much of the cultural thing.
Well, he was a preacher from India and moved to Canada when he was a teenager, I think, and
Mhm.
then moved to Atlanta and like set up a church here. But he did apologetics and going to college campuses and challenging and debating people on the authenticity of the Bible and whatnot. One guy said, "Well, I'm a pretty good person. I should be able to decide what's right and wrong for my life." Ravi said something like, "Well, what if your neighbor feels that way and your neighbor, his opinion that it's okay to boil you in oil and then eat you? So
Right.
we can't
Right.
have everybody just doing what they want." But again, look at the results. Can't think of her name right now, but this was this girl. She's South African and Jewish, and I can't think of her name. She has an Ngomi, something like that, Ngomi. But they let the cameraman get on sometimes and speak and say his opinions, and so that's kind of
Hmm.
where I get that from. He said on
Okay.
there, he said, when I'm talking to people, I say, regardless of what you believe, when I do what the Bible says, my life is better than if I don't do what it says. And so that
Yeah.
counts for something. But anyway,
Well,
to get back to um, your work and your articles and beliefs about things, there's another thing that you said, another statement about why Missouri votes for progressive issues, but conservative candidates.
yeah, that's something I've talked about this with lots of other folks, and it's something I'm still trying to get my head around, I have to admit. But every time Missouri has an opportunity to vote for progressive things, they go for it. For example, we have fairly uh, loose marijuana laws at this
Yeah,
point. Marijuana is basically legal, recreational marijuana, that is. We had tried to rewrite the Constitution, not rewrite the Constitution, we tried to change a law called, we call it this way, we call it the Clean Missouri, which was supposed to keep, actually, it was a constitutional amendment, sorry about that, but that was supposed to regulate gerrymandering so that political districts were drawn in a more fair
yeah,
way, and they had a way of doing it. Well, 2 years later, the Republicans, who have the supermajority here, backed that one out. But nevertheless, a majority of people voted for that. A majority of people voted to get rid of the abortion ban in Missouri.
yeah.
So that was written into our Constitution as well. We can talk a little bit more about that, but there's a never-ending chapter about that in Missouri here. We voted to raise minimum wage. We voted to provide earned sick leave for people. So every time, and it's not a small number of people, it's a fairly significant majority of people vote on these progressive issues. And then what happens is they vote for these conservative candidates, Republican mainly, that do nothing but back out these
Yeah.
laws, and they fight these laws. We also voted for Medicare expansion, and the Republicans fought that one tooth and nail, but the judge had to come in and say, no, you guys got to do what the people say.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah. I think Missouri is beginning to learn a couple lessons here in terms of being progressive but voting for conservative
I
candidates.
was thinking
And I
just thinking that
go ahead.
sometimes it may come down to that candidate and what he's saying in his campaign and what he's talking about that could sway people or win them over. Whoever they're running against, it can come down to those two people. It's usually more than two running because you have the other parties, but with the two main candidates, it comes down to them. Like for example, I'm sure there's a lot of people that voted for Trump that would have voted for Biden, but they didn't want to vote for Kamala, necessarily.
Right.
So I think sometimes people can just
Or they just didn't vote
right,
at
yeah,
all.
that's what ended up happening. There are
Yeah.
people that they definitely didn't want to vote for Trump, but they didn't like what she was saying, and so that was kind of like a vote for Trump or who would have ever been in the lead. And then just
Hmm.
me myself, I'm sure you remember people like Zell Miller and what is this guy's Lieberman. Joe Lieberman.
Oh,
So
Joe
Zell
Lieberman.
Miller was he was a Democrat in Congress, and Joe Lieberman ran for president, but John Kerry got the nomination instead. And I'm just saying that I really like Lieberman, even though he's a Democrat. I would have voted for him. What I heard from other Democrat voters, yeah, but he's a real conservative, or he's too far on right.
Yeah.
But
He was pretty
Yeah, and so
conservative.
that's kind of what I look at as opposed to a label, the label of the party.
Yeah.
What are they talking about? Understand there could be an entire party behind you, and they have handlers, or they have people that are trying to tell you what you need to do to win. And people should be honest.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, once they get in office, that you are the head of that office, whatever it is you're operating in. So let people talk to you, let them consult you, and then make a decision, what you think is right or wrong.
Right.
Instead of just letting them, is it just hand them the keys. Okay, I'm gonna sit in the back seat. Let me know when I need to make a public appearance to get on camera and turn it a 3/4 angle. Tell me what to wear. Can somebody lay my clothes out?
Yeah.
I don't know what looks the best or what's gonna work in my favor. That's just, it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
good. It's not good.
Well, there's a lot to unpack over what you just said there, but yeah, in general, I would say that the more extremist Republicans in Missouri have told you where they're coming
Mhm.
from. They've been fairly honest in that regard. They tell you who they are and where they're coming from. And so I still have to question, why do people then vote for it? And there's that split mind that drives a wedge here in Missouri, as it does across the whole nation. But I will say this much: one of the biggest factors, I believe, is the messaging. Republicans have had a superior messaging channel for many, many years. They built this channel up over many years. Ann Nelson wrote a book. I don't know if you know her book, called Shadow Network. Itemized everything, all the pieces of history, how the conservative movement actually grabbed a hold of the media machine
Mhm.
and controlled it. Now, despite what they say with Fox News, which I like to call Fox Entertainment, they tend to be on one side, and CNN on the other side. No, they're all pretty much gone with the conservatives. The CNN, MSNBC, I tune them out now. I don't watch them anymore because they, I believe, are part of this messaging machine. They've fallen for this message machine. How often do you hear about the LA riots that are taking place? They're not riots. These are the messages that come through the media. So people believe that. Um, and let's face it, Trump gives people a lot of reasons to vote for him, because he'll say, "Oh, your finances are taking a hit right now because of Biden's inflation. And Biden opened up the border and let all these illegals in. You're all coming in now, and they're taking health care away from you." And none of this stuff is true. But these messages travel very, very quickly, and they travel throughout the media sphere, especially the conservative ones, but even the ones that are supposedly not conservative. These messages travel, and people believe these untruths. I can't tell you how many people I run into that say, "I don't want illegal aliens getting free healthcare and free social security." I say, they don't get that. Go look it up. They don't get any of that.
Mhm.
That's what it means to be an illegal alien. You're not taking any of the safety
Mhm.
net. But people don't believe that, right? And so the messaging is out there, and the Democrats are extremely poor at fixing that record. And what they don't realize is that lies travel a lot faster than
Yeah.
truth. And so that lie is out there. Once it gets lodged in someone's mind, you are now on defense, trying to dislodge
Yeah.
that lie. So that's really what builds up, and I think what happens, that sort of thing happens in Missouri. So you get these messages that say Democrats bad, Republicans good. But then when you remove all that messaging and you say, "Hey, do you want abortion to be legal?" Or, "Hey, do you want to have weed legal in Missouri?" Or, "Hey, do you want to have a better minimum wage?" and so on. People say, "Oh yeah, I'll go for
Right.
that,"
Right.
right? But but they still go with that conservative messaging.
Yeah, the
So
economy
it's
is,
a
is
it's a
one of
tough
it's one of
message.
the number one factors. The
What's that?
economy is one of the top
Oh
factors.
yeah, yeah,
But I think
yeah,
I think along the same lines of what you're saying with Kamala and Trump, they were both asked what they would do about the economy. And just saying what I've seen or what I've caught from the sources that I have is Kamala's answer many times went into her talking about, well, I grew up as a latchkey kid and I had Nana
yeah,
was taking care of me, used to come home from school. And it makes it sound like she doesn't have a plan because she doesn't get to it right away. Then in
right,
another interview, probably was within a month of that, Trump is asked the same question, and his first response is, "I would bring down the cost of energy."
yeah,
Now, I haven't seen him do that. I haven't seen any evidence of him doing that yet, but at least it's an answer, which makes sense to me just because of how the cost of gas affects everybody to some degree with
Right.
the shutting down of the Keystone pipeline. There are truckers who, they spend 15, 16 hours a day on the road, and UPS and FedEx that they have to deliver things. And so they made the cost of shipping go up. And then, of course, the food that has to get to the grocery
Sure.
store, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Making the
it
consumer
cascades
make up
into
the
everything.
difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And those simple answers are what people hear, because the thing is, and this is something I'm trying, is I'm kind of an iconoclast in the Democratic Party here because I push back on a lot of things. But one of the things that the Democrats don't realize is that the short answer wins the day. Trump said, I'm going to bring prices down on day one. Quite certain he didn't know exactly how he was going to do it. He just knew what people wanted to hear, and that's what he fed them, because he knew that by the time day one comes around, there'd be so many things, so many other things going on
Hmm.
that he would be able to hide behind these other things. And if nothing else, he could always blame Biden for it. So that was his mode of operation from the very beginning. He said he would stop the Ukraine war. He'd get Zelensky and Putin on the
Yeah,
phone, and that war would be stopped within
right.
24 hours. That's what people wanted to hear, right? So he gave it to
Good.
them. They want it, so now, has he been able to do
Yeah.
it? No.
And
A majority of these things he doesn't deliver on. A vast majority of
well,
these things he does
big
not
things
deliver on.
too, even if it was
So,
just a couple. Something like I would stop the war in Ukraine in a day, or I'm going to make Mexico pay for the wall. That makes me wonder,
yeah,
really?
all that stuff.
How are you going to do that?
But the thing is, you're thinking
Yeah,
about it. I mean, guys like me, critical
right.
thought, right? That's what we think. Like, okay, I'm willing to listen to his plan. No, he doesn't have a plan. Okay. But if he had a plan, I'd be willing to listen to it. But he doesn't have a plan. So my BS detector goes off right away. So, okay, the guy's is basically lying to us. But guess what? That lie sticks with a lot of people. Not that they're not capable of critical
Hmm.
thought. This is that people are so busy these days. And I got a whole spiel about why people are so busy these days, which goes back to the wealth gap. But they're extremely busy these days. They're trying to make a living, trying to put food on the table for their kids, etc. Things going on at school. They don't have the bandwidth to sit down and look at the economy for what it is. They can't listen to Jerome Powell or whoever's running the Fed chairman right now. Is it still Powell? I can't remember. But they don't have time to listen to him and all the nuances that he says about the economy. That's just like, it's like remember those old Charlie Brown cartoons where the adults are talking and it comes out, whoa, 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 whoa,
Right.
whoa, whoa. That's what it means. Even me, I tune out after a while, right? Yeah, I can't listen. It takes energy and it
Some
takes
people
time.
legitimately
And
do,
so people want that simple answer.
people don't they don't have the
So
time. They don't.
they don't.
Yeah.
And this is another problem that we have in our society, a systemic problem we have in our society. People are too darn busy. Now, I give you one view as to why that is. I'm going to go back to 1980. I always like to go back to that year because that to me is like that's the beginning of sort of things starting to go off the
Hmm.
rail. Back in 1980, you could buy a house for about 2.5 times your median
Hmm.
salary. So in other words, I took the average price of a home divided by the median salary and end up with a ratio of 2.5. You go now to do that, it's almost 6 to
Yeah.
1. So what that means is you got to earn more than twice the amount of money you earned before. Forget about, cost of living increases. Well, we can even consider cost of living increases and so on because inflation is constantly going up. But things like housing are just
Yeah.
skyrocketing. And so now, when a husband and wife, a young couple starts out, my son is going through this right now. He's 30 years old. When a young couple starts out, uh, they want to buy a house because that's the
Yeah.
American dream, right? You buy a house, you build equity in it, you raise your kids in it, and so on. And then when you're done, you downsize and you got a big pile of money in front of you. They can't do that,
Yeah.
right? Because unless both husband and wife are working,
Absolutely.
unless they're both pulling in a salary, then they can afford the house. But then who's taking care of the kid, right? So I wrote another article about that recently that said if you want to have more children, fix the economy. Yeah, and so that's why people are so busy. Husband and wife are busy. They come home, they got to take care of the kids, they got to do the housework, got to do the cooking, the cleaning, get the kids ready for school. Pick up the kids from daycare, whatever. It's making us crazy busy out there, and it's all because of this wealth gap that is just doing crazy things. And one more thing I'll say is that the three big finance companies, BlackRock, what was that, Vanguard and State Street, They are buying houses, sometimes sight unseen. They are buying houses and they are not selling them. What they're doing is renting them out. So a young couple now that goes out there to try to buy a house, they're being outbid by these big companies, big finance companies, many of whom have money from your 401ks. So they're using your 401k against you, but they're being outbid by these big companies. And so they're not able to afford their home. Okay. That's weird. Okay. Sure. Was your power plug messed up or something? Okay.
You there?
Yep.
Oh,
Can you see me?
okay. All right, great. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you could
Okay,
hear
cool.
me yet. All right, it says preview
Yeah, I
your
can hear you.
takes. Okay. All right, so let's try to finish up to where you could finish what you were talking about already, and then I guess I don't. Well, yeah, I'll say that it's coming to a close, and then you could mention people want to follow you or find your articles and whatnot, where they can do that. So yeah, we'll just go right in, and because it's going to be edited out later, so you can go ahead
Sounds good.
and finish what you were saying. You don't have to even back up or miss a beat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the conclusion of what I have to say here is that the young people these days have a really tough time getting started in this economy. And when they having to compete against large finance corporations to purchase their home, that yes, people will say, well, that's capitalism in action, right? Well, is it capitalism in action when young couples are working so hard they can't have children, they can't pay attention to the politics that's going on around them? Recreation time is getting less and less. These are the things that happen. And as a state representative, if I make it to state representative level, I'm not sure what I could do about that specific issue other than propose a higher level tax, or maybe not give the tax breaks to companies that go out and buy these homes and rent them out to people. I understand there's mom and pop operations that like to do that. So let's draw the line at, say, 50 homes or something like that. This is the same idea that Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, I don't believe he was reelected, but he had that same idea, had a similar idea, I should say, and pushed that through the U.S., tried to push it through the U.S. Congress, didn't make it. We have to do something to protect the people, in other words. Right now, the people are just being preyed upon by some large corporations, and it's getting out of hand, especially for young people
Can
these
I ask you
days.
a question about the the financing that people have to pay on their houses? Because I may be a little ignorant of that, but the mortgage companies who have the loans, or I don't know if they just determine their own interest rate for what it would be. But is that mostly done where the finance companies or the mortgage companies, they basically just look around at each other, the other ones that are in that market, kind of like four gas stations on four corners, and say, okay, 395, you 398, I'll come 3 cents below the lowest guy. Regardless of that, may still be expensive, but to try to
Right.
make as much money as I can while still being competitive. Or is it
Right.
the cost of doing something? I mean, the house is already built, and everything that goes into a house seems to come from six or seven different sources. But you got finance
Right.
companies, which that's basically all they deal with. They finance, meaning give loans in exchange for making a profit on the interest.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I think that what you're describing there is capitalism as it should work.
Mhm.
You got four gas stations competing for the lowest price. Yeah, these guys play those games as long as they're not collaborating in any way, which is like violating antitrust laws. And same thing with houses. What I'm talking about now is the housing prices
Yeah.
themselves. If you're making $50,000 a year, which is kind of the median salary in the eighth district of Missouri where I live. That's U.S. congressional eighth district. 50 to 55,000 is the median salary, but you're paying 300,000 plus for a home.
Oh yeah.
Some of these homes out there, yeah, you can get away with less than that. You can go out and buy a trailer home and
Yeah.
do things much less than that. But the home where I am right now, that's about it's well over 300,000 at this point. The This is what young couples have to deal with, making those mortgage payments, which means that they're just going to have mother and father are going to have to work.
Yeah.
If you go back to 1980, I don't know if you remember like that old show called All in
Oh
the
yeah.
Family. It's actually from the
Mm-hmm.
1970s, Archie Bunker and so on. I pick on that because that was sort of a snapshot of where America was at that point. You had one man who was working I don't know if it's a
Cab
cab driver or
driver.
a longshoreman.
Yeah.
The cab driver, yeah.
And Edith
So he was
didn't work.
making,
She didn't. She didn't have
what?
a job or bring a
Yeah,
paycheck.
Edith didn't work. Well, it was a
Yeah.
classic family, right? The man goes out and makes the money. The woman stays home, takes care of it, and he's able to afford the home, afford his car, afford to send his daughter to college, that sort of thing. That was the American dream, and some people say, well, let's make America great again. I'm all in on that one. Okay. But what built out the American middle class? What was the one entity that built out the American middle class? It was the unions.
Mm.
They came up with the 5-day work week. They negotiated better wages for their workers. You just go right down the line. The unions were responsible for a lot of the middle class and a lot of the privileges that we have. Well, what happened to unions? First thing that happened after Reagan was voted in 1980, when he took office in 81, he fired the air traffic controllers because they dared to go on
Yeah.
strike. And this set up a cascading series of motions that ground the unions, just ground them into the dirt. Right now, he just went out and fired a whole bunch of federal workers that were protected under union contract. He tore up these contracts and fired federal workers. This is what's happening to the American worker. They're getting less and less of the piece of that pie, and the days of Archie Bunker
Mhm.
are gone. Unless the husband is like some high-end
Yeah.
lawyer or a doctor or something like
Right.
that, those days are gone. And the typical family now is husband and wife. They have to work. It's not just wanting to work; they have to
Yeah.
work, right? I mean, I still run into exceptions: stay-home mom and stay-home dads, but for the most part, the average American family, both mother and father have to work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is what's wrong with America. You want to make America great again? Fine. Bring the unions back. Bring public schools back. Public schools are also under attack, particularly in Missouri here. They've been under attack, and these attacks have been fairly successful in grounding down all the public schools here. 30% of the schools in Missouri are now down to 4-day weeks. Why? Because that's the only way they could attract teachers. Teachers can work 4 days a week and then have the other 3 days a week to make more money because they have to. They're not being paid enough.
Yeah,
You
with
know,
unions, what I would like to see is the terms of the union and what they want for their employees, and that the company that it's inside of, or I mean, there's some that are part of an industry that people can work at several companies and be a part of that. The United Auto Workers, not just one
sure,
plant. But
right,
I would like to see good people come to the table and negotiate it, because it's kind of this thing about something that was birthed out of a strong need for it, and then it can get extreme to the other side, or there could be an overcorrection, and then things are never dialed back. One example, I'm a fan of classic movies, and I was just reading this little piece on James Cagney. When he started the first couple of years, the studios were having people work like 17, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so he got with some other people and fought for there to be stipulations, and we can't work more
right,
than this number, because it was killing them and just draining their
yeah,
energy. And they, a lot of people have families, and so that's extreme. And then you don't want, on the other hand, I've seen some teachers unions where it's like, in a clause or whatever, that they can't get fired. They don't even have to really
right,
teach. All they have to do is show up. And then a lot of these teachers, they would read a newspaper with their feet kicked up on the desk, and kind of letting kids go about what they wanted to do.
right.
Every
Well,
community just
you've
needs
got
to stay on top of that and make sure things don't go off to one side.
absolutely, yeah. Unions. I mean, yeah. There's corruption in unions as well. So you've got these things at both ends. The thing is, in America, that's how we roll, though, right? We fix things where we
Mhm.
find them, but we keep when we have a good idea, we move forward. I'll give you another example right now. Very much fighting unions is Amazon and to some degree Walmart. Did you realize that we're subsidizing a lot of their labor with our tax dollars? Because they are not paying their people enough to make a living. So a lot of the people that
Yeah.
work for these companies, Walmart and Amazon being two of them, there's more out there. They have to draw upon public services in order to make ends meet. So our tax dollars are going into helping people that are working full time already, or close to
I was
full
only
time.
aware of the retired people who they come in and work for them, or there's something going on. I know they get a tax break, but I didn't know somebody's at Walmart or Amazon 30, 35 years old that tax dollars are going toward their salary in some way.
Well, not toward their salary, but we are subsidizing them with Medicaid,
Okay.
SNAP benefits, because they're not making enough. And what companies are trying to do now, and I've seen this firsthand working for companies, they make you sign an agreement that you cannot work for their competitor,
Yeah,
right? So they can let you go and they say, for at least a year, you cannot work for one of our
yeah.
competitors. Well,
That happened to me.
where
Yeah,
is, yeah. And so, where are our lawmakers at that
yeah.
point? What companies are afraid of is that you're going to give away their secrets. I get that, and I've
Hmm.
firsthand seen someone give away company secrets, and I got drawn into giving a testimony
Oh,
about it myself. I understand companies want to protect themselves, but you can go work for your competitor and not give away secrets from your previous company.
right.
But even so, I mean, you quit Walmart and you go to work for Best Buy or something like that. I mean, come on, you can't tell someone not to work for a particular company or something.
And I
So
think people
yeah,
many times they want to use the skills that they have learned. It's a skill that they picked
absolutely.
up. You don't get all
Yeah,
your skills in trade school or college, but sometimes it's with work experience. And so that's really why it's valuable to list it on a resume, is because it's showing if I've done this, that means that I know how to do it and I can do it for you.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't see the problem with that, honestly. I see a problem with giving away company secrets, but that doesn't happen
Yeah,
very often. What happens is you get your skill
right.
where you work, and you take that skill to your next job. It's just as simple as that. Yeah, there are also, along those same lines, there are these clauses when you sign your credit card contract or something. If you read the fine print, which very few people do, we don't have time,
Yeah,
right? I get that.
pages
I
of
don't read them
stuff.
all the time. Pages. Buried in those pages is an arbitration clause that says, okay, if you have a problem with this company, it could be credit card company, it could be your phone company for your cell
Yeah.
phone or whatever. There's an arbitration clause that says, no, you can't sue them directly if they've done something wrong to you. You got to go to an arbiter into
Hmm.
arbitration, and a lot of times they pick the arbiters themselves. So it's like this is the type of things. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau tries to stop all this stuff. Well, guess what just happened? The CFPB, or Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, yeah, has is being defunded at this point. So we're being thrown to the wolves in a sense. We're not getting into this protection. So when people say, "Well, don't sign the contract," well, fine. Well, we're going to get a cell phone if you don't sign one of those
Hmm.
contracts. Who's going to sell you a cell phone that doesn't have an
Yeah.
arbitration clause attached to it? So we don't have a choice. And this is where our lawmakers are falling short. They're not looking at these details and saying, you can't do this to our people. You can't force somebody into arbitration when through your negligence you've done some harm to
I
somebody.
think that could be
So
a good thing for almost an entire platform, is to have a list of things at
yeah,
different companies that should be changed, that any employees would agree, and most reasonable people that are on the outside of the company would agree should change for working conditions. You get 8 or 10 things that you say that you're gonna fight for to make that change happen. That could get a lot of support at the voting booth.
it can generate a lot of support, but what you're up against, and this is the conundrum that I think every politician faces, is you start talking about stuff like that, big business starts to notice, the
Hmm.
lobbyists start to take notice, and next thing you know, they're funding your opposition.
Boy,
As a politician, you don't want to take money from big
right?
companies, but a lot of them
Yeah,
do. And the ones that don't necessarily win because they don't have enough money to put the big billboards up there or run the ads on TV or whatever. So they don't win. But the ones that are willing to take the money, they're the ones that win.
I heard this thing about many people that are in politics. Congress and D.C. governors and people that are elected officials. Many of them get offered bribes or yeah, yeah. I guess a bribe, just an
Yeah.
incentive and agreement, saying, we'll give you this amount of money, give you these gifts if you do this, and with it
Oh
being
yeah.
unethical, that they can be offered that 10 times a month, And in most of it, they say no to, even the corrupt ones. But then
Hmm.
there's one or once in a while that slips through the crack that they think that they can do and get away with. But it's just like being in an industry where the temptation is so great.
It's always in front of you.
Like
Yeah.
you heard about the basketball players who have these groupies that follow them around with a mission to try to find them. And so there's there's a dozen women that try to find out where this guy's hotel room is. And so there's a filter. Most of them get stopped, but a couple get through. And then he's face to face with the temptation and has to tell them himself because they got past security or whatever. And it can be a lot. It can be a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's not only the bribery. I don't think bribery is a huge thing, outright bribery, because people tend to get caught at that stuff.
Mhm.
But what does happen with many of these, I'd say majority, and Democrats and Republicans alike, they go off site
Oh
and they
yeah.
do what's called dialing for dollars. They go to call centers. It has to be off government
Hmm.
property, and they will spend up to 50% of their time dialing for dollars. That means calling all of your donors. So first thing that happens when you get elected is you start working on your next
Yeah.
election. So that means making those calls, promising people things, and that's how the campaign funds
Hmm.
come in. Now that's just for campaign funds, which don't go directly to
Yeah.
you, but it's kind of a bribe in a sense that it goes to your
Sure.
campaign. It also can go to these PACs and the super PACs, and the super PACs can be completely um, uh, how to say it, completely opaque about where their money goes. And yeah, they're going to throw their support behind someone who's going to be nice to them.
Right.
And so that's, as they say, America is the best democracy you can buy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big issue.
Still a
Big
great
issue.
country, and you can't completely get rid of corruption. And I would say 5% of the world is more corrupt than we are, with Ukraine being one of them. It's just not there are not things in
Yeah.
place that can monitor and regulate like we have here, where they where they're working for the people.
Beg
I'm
to
sorry. Go
differ.
ahead.
I would beg to differ. I think, that I've spent time in other countries as well. My wife is from the Netherlands, and so I get back there quite often.
Hmm.
But just, you try to get away with that corruption in any of these European nations out there. I don't think that would work. I think they have their checks and balances in place. What's happening now is we have corruption on a mass scale. We have this flying palace that the country of Qatar still wants to give to Trump. Qatar is a proxy for a lot of terrorist organizations out
Yeah.
there. So I think it was who was it? Laura Loomer said that we're basically taking a plane from jihadists in suits.
Mm.
And I, as much as I really don't like Laura Loomer, she really hit the nail on the head with that one. That's happening. We've got Trump giving out the Trump card. I just read about that this
Hmm.
morning. Anyone with $5 million can buy themselves a green card. There's the
Huh.
Trump
Never heard of
coin.
that.
Trump,
Yeah.
Donald Trump and Melania have that. Their family is reaping in a lot. Abu Dhabi right now well, this is actually as of about a month ago, in the process of putting up to $2 billion into Trump coin. So who's getting that money? Donald
Yeah.
J.
I would
Trump,
assume.
and that's going right to his pocket. So the corruption is out in the open. The only difference now is that we're seeing it. We're seeing it in real
Yeah.
time. And still, people are still kind of in shock over this. And they'll say the same things you are, like the corruption isn't that bad in this country. No, it's pretty bad. And that's one thing that brings countries down is corruption. And I understand there's always going to be some level of
Yes.
corruption, but it's a matter of
Yes.
degrees. And right now, it is absolutely out of control, in my opinion. Absolutely out
It
of control.
definitely exists here in the U.S. I was thinking about Mexico and uh, I guess some of the European countries, but just where I mean, even Haiti when they had the earthquake and the relief effort was sent down
Mm,
there, and it was like I don't know, some millions of dollars that was sent, and it didn't get through, or didn't get through to the right people, because these
right.
militia, these people that they don't technically work for the government, but they're driving jeeps and wearing battle fatigues and just intercepting. It just didn't. you need an army almost to escort the money and food and other supplies to get to the places that they need to, because it's so.
Yeah, that is a really difficult situation that happened. That 2010 when that I think when that
Hmm.
earthquake happened. Even now, it's just they're still suffering. I don't know what you do in a situation like that. I mean, you could send your own army down there, but then you're basically invading a sovereign
Yeah.
territory. So how does that work? I think the next best solution was to get some people out of Haiti and bring them to the States, which is what a lot of them did. They're now
Hmm.
being forced to go back, which I think is unfair. I mean, we have a concern about our population in the state, United States, a population dropping, but yet we're kicking people out that are progressive, productive, not progressive, but productive.
Here's an idea. Um, didn't plan this in advance, but kind of just what from what we were talking about, and just ask you what you think of this, if this is possible. What of if there's a nation where there aren't term limits on the president or the government, and elections are fixed, the guy wins every time 100%, or
Right.
98%. Is there a way to ask the citizens if they want to have them removed, some way to get the majority of the consensus from them, and then it becomes something that they want and we're helping them, as opposed to us just invading a sovereign nation?
I think that's a powder keg. It's a very dangerous powder keg because there will always be questions about whether the people were polled
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah,
Did they feel coerced to say this?
the details.
I just think it's a difficult
uh,
situation. I think Haiti is one of those things where damned if you do and damned if
mhm.
you don't. And I'd be somewhat speechless. What I'd have to do. I'm not always the smartest guy in the room. Right now, I'm the smartest guy in the room because I'm the only guy in the room
Yeah,
over here.
that's all right.
But
You just
but
want there to be
the
in a crowd full of, in a crowd filled.
I want to be surrounded by
Right,
smart
right.
people
I was going to
that
say
can come
something
up
else,
with
but
good ideas.
yes.
Yeah, because I even in engineering, I mean, I just constantly being humbled by I think I'm pretty smart, and then some other guy comes along like, oh crap, why didn't I think of that? But no, I'm not the smartest person in the room normally. But what I would want to do is surround myself with smart
Yes.
people and try to figure out, what do you do about things like Haiti? Another one's going on in Missouri right now. Our hospitals, our rural hospitals and health clinics are closing. They're going offline, and there's counties out here that have no medical services whatsoever. Fairly rural counties. But if you ever in rural counties, it just means there's a lot of farmers out there, and farming is like one of the most dangerous professions
Yeah.
out there. You're working with big machines and you're all
Right.
alone, right? So, one of the ideas that I thought of, I got to get a lot of smart people to surround me on this is sure, we can start rebuilding hospitals. I'm not sure how to do that, but how about having a medevac system that doesn't charge an arm and a leg, literally, to get you to the big cities? So if something happens, you get medevaced
Hmm.
out right
Yeah.
away. And on the medevac, you have qualified people that can do more than just stabilize your symptoms, but actually do more invasive
Yeah.
things. That would cost a lot less, I think, than trying to build a rural hospital.
That's a
But it's one of those things where I got to get myself surrounded by some smart people and let's try to work through the
well,
finances and everything
that's
else
a
on that.
good thing, and that's a feasible thing in certain communities, because long time ago, a little over 15 years, my brother had a stroke. He lived in Bisbee, Arizona, which is very close to the border, and he didn't have health insurance, and he was airlifted
Mm,
to Phoenix and put in the
mm,
ICU there. So somebody made the decision or had the resources. I'm just thinking that that's not cheap to use a helicopter, and the fuel and everything that comes
right.
along with it, and the pilot has to get paid. So they looked at someone that wasn't part of the system and said that he needed help. This is important. Minutes are critical, so I need to get him there. Was
Mm,
transported to a city that was not nearby. So
right.
that obviously is already a blueprint in place for that to happen. So I think different communities or different states can do that, because you make a good point. When you first start talking about farmers, I was like, yeah, it's their number one source of income and their livelihood, and it can be lucrative for them if they pull it off. But if somebody slips under the tractor, and the hospital is not within 10 miles, you
Yeah.
gotta have something, have something in place to get them where
Yeah.
they need to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they get a heart attack or something like that. I mean, every
Yeah.
minute counts, so you've got to get some sort of air ambulance system out there. That to me is like the immediate solution. I don't think there's necessarily a
Yeah.
long-term solution, but at least that solves some of these counties out there that don't have these types of services. So, and I would like to see it so that's not charging people any money,
Yeah.
because these helicopter rides are like thousands and thousands of
Right.
dollars. And if you're uninsured, you're going to have another heart attack when you see the bill.
Right. Right. A bill that would take maybe years, because it's not going to be
Yeah.
your only bill.
Exactly.
It's one more
Yeah.
than all the other ones you already got. you
Yeah.
you
Exactly.
can't call up the electric company and say, "Hey, I was hauled in an ambulance, and they charged me $5,000 for that, and I got to pay them." They're going to say, "We don't want to hear that. Do you want lights or don't you?"
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, Dan, we're gonna wrap up now. Is there anything you can say about what people can follow you, or see you read your
Sure.
articles or whatnot?
Yeah, the main page for me is just danformo.com. DAN, the number 4, MO for
Hmm.
Missouri. Have no idea where they get MO out
Yeah.
of Missouri, but danformo.com.
Yeah. What's Montana?
And then from
What's
there,
the abbreviation for that?
I think it's MT. There's like 8 states that begin with M's: Mississippi, Maine, Missouri, Montana, Minnesota,
Yeah.
Michigan. I don't know. So they have to kind of figure out
Right.
what to do. So Missouri, they decided for some reason, oh, let's just grab the letter O and stick it in there. So it's danformo.com.
That's easy to
And
remember.
yeah, it's pretty easy. It's pretty short. And then from there, I have at the bottom of the page, you can see all the links going off to like this place called the Frontline Progressive, where I publish all my articles. Facebook, I think there's a link up there for Reddit and so on. So it's kind of the jump off point for everything else. I put a lot up there. And I'm doing something different than most politicians. Most politicians would put like a one page there and say, here's who I am and here's all the check boxes. And that's it, right? You can click here to
Yeah.
donate, right? I put lots of pages up there. I want people to see exactly who I am, what
Yeah.
I'm doing. I want them to go to all these links. If they have time, read some of these stories and read some of the articles I've written and get an idea of who I am. Try to be transparent in that way.
Right, right. And people are three-dimensional and have many facets to them, and someone really needs to have that to explain and try to get someone to know who they are that doesn't have the luxury of having a one-on-one conversation or isn't going to meet you in person. So that's good. It's showing them you from 360, because it's many different issues, and so there's many different beliefs about these different things.
Yeah, exactly. Very good.
All right. Hey,
Good.
thanks.
Well, I enjoyed my time here. We had a good
Yeah,
discussion.
it was a good conversation. I enjoyed it. So everybody subscribe and keep coming back and put your comments on if you have any. You can also email myself, and you can give your email address too if you like. But I am brutehonest@gmail.com. Is there an email you like to leave?
Well, just me. If people want to email me directly, it's dan@danformo.com.
Oh,
The same danformo.com, the dan@danformo.com.
yeah, that's good. Keeping
Pretty easy.
consistent and less to remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Just about donations, I can't take any right now because I'm officially not, as far as the state of Missouri is concerned, I haven't signed up with the Missouri Ethics Commission yet and filled out all the paperwork yet. I will do that, but until that point comes, you can click on the donation button, but it will just tell you, please come back later.
Yeah.
No
Understandable.
donations at this point.
Right, right. But when is this next election that you will be running in? Just make sure people.
Well, it'll be 2026.
Okay.
So technically, I have to sign up by, I think, the beginning of March next year. I'll probably sign up before that. I'm holding back a little bit because I'm working with some of the local Democratic people here because there's also an open state Senate seat. They have nobody ready to run on that one. And that's a much bigger hill for me to climb. So I'm a little bit hesitant, but I told them, hey, if you don't find somebody soon, I'm willing to do it. But I'm going to need a lot more support, but I'm willing to do it. So I'm kind of holding back on that, seeing which direction that goes.
Deal, Dan. All right.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, you know what you're doing. We have to.
Well, I give the impression anyways, don't I?
Well, people have to be a person of principle and a person of conviction, and stick with what you believe. And so
Yeah.
you know what you believe, and so you can go hard in any direction.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right, hey, take care.
Thanks, Elmo.
All right, and
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll I'll be in touch with you, let you know like when the full episode's available, and also I release several shorts before then, leading up to it. But
Oh,
yeah,
perfect.
you can
Yep.
go to the channel and subscribe, and then everything that comes out come to you that way. But I'll put the link
Okay.
in Podmatch as well.
Okay. Perfect. Sounds good.
All
Thanks,
right,
Elmo.
you're welcome. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.